to the Weekly Bioanalysis, a KCAS podcast.
Hello and welcome to the 38th episode of the Weekly Bioanalysis, the official podcast of KCAS Bioanalytical and Biomarker services. KCAS is a bioanalytical CRO serving the pharmaceutical and biopharmaceutical industries for over 40 years. My name is John Perkins and I've been in the bioanalytical LCMS space for over 26 years. I'm here with my co-host Dominic Guarino.
Hello, my name is Dominic Guarino and I've been in the immunology and gene therapy space for a little over 26 years now.
Dominic and I are senior scientific advisors at KCS, and either or both of us are available to answer any questions you may have regarding this podcast or any of KCS's services. I'm located in upstate New York, Dom is in Kansas, and our producers are in Missouri and Kansas City, so we're all over the map. We're thrilled to have you listening to the 38th episode of the podcast, which is now available virtually everywhere: Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon, and many others. Wherever you choose to find and play your podcast, you can now likely find the Weekly Bioanalysis. We welcome all of you, whether you are joining us for the first time or if you're a regular listener. As many of you know, if you've listened to any of our previous episodes, we started the podcast when COVID restrictions prevented us from continuing business as usual. We were unable to meet face to face, but we wanted to continue communicating with all of you. The podcast was an idea we'd always had, but it suddenly became the perfect medium for us to employ. Today's podcast will be a review of the latest news and resources, and then a focus on a topic of our choosing before discussing any feedback we've had from you. We're constantly looking for topics, and we'll be happy to discuss something that you want us to cover. Then we'll wrap up and give you a little teaser for the next episode, letting you know what is coming in the future. So again, we're fired up to have you here, and we're looking forward to a fun episode today. To kick us off for podcast number 38, Dom is going to go over today's podcast topic a bit before we jump into the news and resources section. Dom.
John, I love that you're fired up. You got some energy today. I like that.
I couldn't be more fired up.
So as John mentioned, the main portion of our podcast today is the State of the Union of vaccines. So still a very hot topic. We're going to go over, in general, vaccinations in the U.S. We're going to talk about some update of candidate vaccines and other investigative vaccines. We're also going to drill down into some questions that we had that we hope to be able to address, like how long do you expect a vaccine to last, and things of that nature. How long does an antibody rate? How long do antibodies last in the body? What's the decay rate? And then some of the frequencies of administration of vaccines, just a whole host of items that we'll talk about, and we'll kind of round out like the race between vaccination and emergence of new variants is the last topic. So a jam-packed episode, a lot of things that we're excited to talk about, John. But before we do that, why don't I get us started off with the news? And as always, we'll start with some latest on COVID. Very interesting first article here, titled "They Had Mild COVID, then their serious symptoms kicked in." John, this is a very good read. I found it quite interesting in terms of individuals, healthy individuals. I think they said the average age was like 43 years of age, over like 200 individuals, and they had COVID and then some lingering effects, right, John? So
Sure.
Over a 6-month period, they had all sorts of effects, ranging from some things like smelling like cigarettes and Lysol, but I think the overlying thing is more neurological, John, is what I sort of interpret.
I think it's that.
Why don't you dive in a little further? But this is a very interesting read, and then I think there are some things about it that I can't tell if it's all COVID or if it's maybe some underlying things, but let's just, as we've been saying all along, John, wear your mask, wash your hands, and avoid getting COVID.
I think my take-home message for this is, even if you get mild symptoms, don't think that you're over it, because there's a chance that you'll get, it will come back and bite you in some other way. I mean, the one person they talked about, she had vision issues, ringing in her ears, like you say, the heightened sensory perception and smells, and then like hand tremors and problems with the limbs and stuff. And it's all like you say, neurological, but these are the articles, like 3 or 4 separate studies all pointing to the same thing, that mild symptoms don't mean that's you done, and just watch out. And for some people it's lasted months. I mean, it's been relatively interesting, the timing of this, because as I think I mentioned to you, both my son and his fiance, she was definitely positive for COVID. He didn't test, but he actually had the heightened, the main symptom he had was vinegar dominating everything. So if his height, his smell, he could pick up vinegar in sauces and stuff, and in some dishes it completely ruined. He couldn't eat some food, and he said there was he had a bottle of kombucha and he had 2 sips of it and he couldn't drink it because all he could taste was vinegar, and it receded with time. So again, it indicates that yes, he had it, but his fiance had it, was much worse off. I mean, when we spoke to her a couple of weeks ago, I mean, she was exhausted, short of breath. She lost her sense of smell and taste, so she was getting a lot of the classic symptoms. And so we obviously keep close tabs on them. And she's getting better, but they were celebrating her walking a block because she was
Wow.
so tired from this. And then actually it coincided with I bumped into one of my ex-colleagues in a local supermarket car park, and I'd known that she'd been diagnosed with COVID back in January. So this was it was a week ago actually. I bumped into her, and she was only just getting back to full-time work. So again, but she's suffering from the brain fog that is cited in this
Yeah.
article. And it really, like you say, it says you don't want to get this. It's because we're still learning about it. I mean, we're a year into the pandemic and we're still finding out more about it. It's definitely take the precautions, get vaccinated. That's the take-home message as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and John, I think read somewhere the average American put on like 18 pounds during COVID. I feel like I put on at least that many. So maybe if I had a loss, everything tasted like vinegar, I could stop my COVID weight. But all kidding aside, there's some serious stuff in here in terms of um, this cognitive impairment. I mean, one individual basically like found himself on a ladder and didn't realize how he got there. I mean, there's some really like kind of disturbing things,
Sure.
but I don't think we want to scare the heck
No,
out
no,
of
absolutely
everybody.
not. Absolutely
So
not.
it's still a small subset of
Sure.
people, but it's the airplane test, John, right? Like I always think about it as would I get on that airplane? And the answer is no. If there's, that's why I wear my mask. That's why I still try to socially distance. I think we're lifting our mask ban in the state of Kansas, but the county of Johnson County has kept it on for the month of April at least. So,
Yeah.
I'll even say it's pretty easy to get a vaccine shot now here
Mhm.
in Kansas City as well. If you get on the you can go on Twitter and it's real easy to find when you spend about a half hour, you can get in line. I will do that after the holiday here, the Easter holiday.
Yes,
But
so I
anyhow,
I
John,
just completed my second. I had my second shot 2 days ago of the Pfizer vaccine. Have to say,
great.
yesterday I felt grim because again, it's that typical, inflammatory reactions, etc. Your body's gearing up. Today I feel much better.
Yeah.
I'm getting there, and it's like I'd much rather deal with one day of feeling pretty uncomfortable than going through these other symptoms, etc.
Yeah,
I
these are
really,
6 months out, a year out. I mean, but I haven't. I know of probably 8 to 10 people that have had COVID, and nobody's been lingering to this effect. Now, there was some aches and pains that lingered, but
yeah.
nothing cognitive or even to some degree. I don't know. I think only one person I
I
know of really
think
got
I
it.
think I saw something passed in the UK. There was some discussion about long COVID. And I didn't have time to follow up on it. Might be something to revisit on another podcast. But again, I just wanted to just a couple of things. In terms of how my son and his fiance caught it, they have been really careful. I mean, we've sort of watched them and made sure that they've been careful and everything. And Boston opened up restaurants, and they went to a restaurant. They were in a corner of the restaurant away from people, but they think that was probably where it happened because I think it's the luck of the draw, to be quite honest. No more than that. So
Yeah, I don't know. You just you never. I think you say the luck of the draw. It's that no one's ever addressed the number of particles it takes to infect somebody. We may never know
sure,
that, right?
yeah,
And then I think they saw that article where all the world's COVID particles could fit in a 12-ounce soda can. So it's just that is really it. And I'm an optimist, John. I hope there's some herd immunity going on right now. I really hope that, like,
well,
if you, and then even in that article, there was a lot of people that never tested positive for COVID, meaning no PCR positive test, but they had symptoms and info.
Yeah.
But then they had antibody production, and that's when they led to the cognitive component of things. So it's really the biggest challenge here is there's no like pattern yet. We're
Mhm.
scientists, John. We love
Oh,
patterns, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
And there's no rhyme or reason. I think that's why I mentioned the 43 years of age. That's actually the piece that's almost more confusing, because there's strong statistics that say that if you're under like 25, you don't really have low to no chances of having any real sickness with COVID. I mean, I know there's some outliers, but let's face it, it's really low. And then even upwards of like, I think the next goes up to like 50 years of age. And there aren't really a whole lot of deaths or even really hospitalizations due to it. And again, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. People get hospitalized
Hmm.
for it, but
Sure.
if there's a million, it might be one or two. I don't know the numbers. So to hear this at the 43 years of age, that's where it kind of gets you like, I don't think these people ever really went hospitalization wise, but they were just
Yeah.
cognitive impairment, and that's a spiral thing. And then it gets into, John, wait for it, right? It's predominantly Caucasians, because the less resources, or even the poorer communities, they're never even making it way. They just think there's something wrong with me. I'm just going to keep living, right? They're not even making their way into the doctor to get treated for this because they lack insurance
So
and so forth. That's another thing. So as we start to try to figure out what's happening, we're missing a good part
sure.
of the picture, I think,
Yep.
in minority. So
Yep.
it's really it's that pattern piece that is, I think, tripping all of us up as
Yep.
scientists.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's fascinating. I just thought it was a good thing to revisit, and
Yeah.
so let's move on. Obviously, we're talking about vaccines in the main section, but one thing that we haven't talked too much about is other treatments, and there's been a lot of news in terms of antibodies, and they seem to be coming more to the fore. And these are just basically four different antibodies that we can just run through all four and just touch on each of them briefly. First up was the Eli Lilly COVID-19 antibody combo ACE study, cutting hospitalizations and deaths by a whopping 87%. So this is interesting because the Lilly got emergency use authorization for the banlanivimab, which was the single antibody. And in the early days, the data wasn't overly convincing, but I mean there was enough to say it can help. But then they combined it with another antibody, the etesevimab, and that cocktail really does seem to be. It really is, like I say, cutting hospitalizations and deaths. So it's been used in that. Let's see, it's really at high risk patients. So for those over 65 or under 65 or overweight and have multiple health problems. But the one concern, and this was recurrent throughout all these articles with the antibodies, is they're not really getting much buy-in at hospitals. So they're trying to figure out why are the therapies not being promoted more to really help people with these. And I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was a shocking number, right? 1 in 20 are eligible
Hmm.
that get it. And these are the things that like kind of aggravate us as scientists to hear that, oh, there's this, what is it? I think upwards of, depends on how you slice it, but let's just say 70% of hospitalizations and deaths can be reduced with this combo of antibodies, right? And then to hear only 1 in 20 that are eligible to get it, this is like what frustrates
Yeah.
America. That's why people think there's a
Well, actually,
conspiracy
no,
that
I
there's an
think
HIV vaccine out there that no one can get, right?
I,
So these are the things that like drive us mad. I don't know
hold it,
why,
hold it,
other than
hold it,
I
hold it,
think.
hold it.
Go ahead.
The
Sorry,
one
John.
in 20 is actually, it was 1 in 20 who are eligible for it were actually getting it, and
Yeah.
it's actually they've seen that the eligible patients who could get it is now up to 1 in 7. So
So
it's not that 1 in 20 are eligible; it's that 1 in 20 of eligible patients aren't getting it. Or sorry, 19 of 20 of eligible patients aren't getting it. So
yeah, that's what I meant.
okay,
That's how
cool,
I
yeah, sure.
interpreted it.
Yep,
Thanks for
yep,
clarifying
sure,
that. But
yep.
to your point, that's how I interpreted 1 out of 20 eligible are getting the drug. So that means 19 out of 20 are not.
Hmm.
And that it's down to 1 in 7. It's improving. And maybe I'm just being harsh. Maybe I feel like I'm a little bit amped up today, John. So, but
It's
but
because it's a holiday weekend and we're all excited.
I don't know. Maybe it's because it's just been the end of the quarter or something, been some long days. But that those are the things where it's like, man, we're working our tails off as a scientific community to find these. Think about it. Within a year, I mean, we can
Sure.
talk about how fast all of this is moving, and then to hear, oh well, it's there, and no one's getting. And it's not a supply thing, John. I think there's
Yep.
plenty of these
Exactly.
monoclonal
Yep.
antibodies.
Yep.
It could just be a cost thing. I
Yes.
can't tell, but what the take home here is, John, and I love that we're talking about this. There are therapies out there, and I think we should all start to continue to wear masks, wash our hands, and as it's getting warmer, John, we're going to see things open up. You even talked about your family going out to eat, but there is not only a vaccine, there's therapies, and hopefully we can.
Sure.
Because I
Yep.
still have family members that are scared of their own shadow, John, and I hope that can start to fade away.
Sure.
Despite getting a vaccine, I hope that can start to diminish.
Yeah.
And to the audience today, I think that's a take home. There's really a nice therapy here.
So and there's more of them. I mean, so
Yeah.
you got GlaxoSmithKline and Vir also gearing up for emergency use authorization on their. It's a single antibody, so not a cocktail. But again, showing that it's the similar patient population to the Lilly trial, but showing big reductions in hospitalizations or deaths. So you've got that. That's there as a potential therapy, and then. We also this week there was a company called Humanigen, and this one I really haven't seen anything about. But they announced that their antibody linzilumab helped keep patients with COVID-19 off ventilation in a phase 3 trial. So that actually gives that they're actually going for a different population of patients. This is for the population of patients where the only course of treatment was dexamethasone. And this is actually a complementary treatment to that. So again, it reduced the improved odds of ventilator-free survival by 54% versus placebo.
Hmm.
And I think this could struggle to be adopted simply because of the cost of it versus dexamethasone, which is obviously just a generic cheap pill.
Hmm.
But it's just one more treatment to have out there. And just one last thing on the antibodies, we're kicked off with the Lilly cocktail that is obviously showing that it's the real deal. But the banlanivimab is that the one that was the single admin to begin with is not. There's concern about how effective that is against the new variants of coronavirus that are coming through. So it's actually been they're actually Lilly and the US government agreed to halt distribution of that
Hmm.
antibody by itself, but because they've got the cocktail, there's less concern about it because we do have these other tools to help deal with things.
Yeah, the cynic in me says, Why sell me one when I can buy two?" Right? No,
I think
the Humanigen one is really interesting, John. That one, it was not on our radar map at all. It's actually blocking GM-CSF. I know it's somewhat new to the game here. It might have some pricing to it, but I think that's actually another. That's the challenge, right? Like, what are there 6 stages of COVID infection? I guess that's one thing we've talked about is like 6 or 8 categories, and I think that's where they're treating at different categories here, and that again kind of makes it a little harder to discern what might be effective and what not, what is or isn't effective. And then
sure.
the other is the fact you mentioned the variants, which certainly is on the forefront, on the really kind of unsettling to the family members I have that are vaccinated and worried about things. But I think there's still we can shelve that for now. I think it's great we touched on antibody updates, but I think this could be a whole nother podcast where we could really drill into. I mentioned one is blocking GM-CSF. I don't know where the Eli Lilly antibody attacks, but I think that would be a
Sure.
good
Yep.
follow up
Yep. I'm up for that.
sort of podcast here. Anyhow, John, I think that kind of wraps up COVID. Unless you had any last words, I think it was good to go
No,
over
not for the moment. I
therapies
have
and
I
what's
have some
next.
thoughts on the variants, but we can talk about that later. That's fine.
Sure. We're gonna jump into something near and dear to me, John. Right? This is an advancement in CAR T cells. This is a company I've been following for a long, long time. It's called CAR M Era Begins, as Charisma is the name of the company. Doses its first patient. And John, without stealing too much thunder, why don't you tell us about what Charisma is up
Well, yeah, this is not my field, so I'm
to?
I'm gonna I'm gonna read
Well,
off.
maybe I'll help you
I'm
out.
gonna
It's
read off
it,
the
you know
sheet
CAR
and
T
then
cells,
just let
right?
you go with this. So basically,
No, everybody. If you haven't listened to our podcast, there are CAR T cells. See,
yeah,
these are engineered
sure,
T cells, right?
yeah,
Self T cells that they engineer. Now they've pivoted to macrophages, which historically, John, I'll say I think innate immune therapeutics back when I started in like the 90s, they were like, I don't want to say a holy grail, the opposite. It was like we were doing T cell therapies, not CAR T cell specific, but autologous T cell therapies. And the biggest thing we were trying to do was stay the heck away from the innate immune system. The last thing we wanted to do was any non-specific, because that's a non-specific pattern recognition is really the term now, where your immune system, it's just surveillance, key and lock theories, and it's just surveying things. And when it encounters something foreign, it attacks.
Sure.
There's no adaptive immune response like a CAR T cell has. So in our worlds, the innate immune system had kind of been like, let's not trigger that because that could lead to a safety issue. Well, now Charisma, and they've been around a long time, they're engineering macrophage therapeutics, John, and that's what led up to this. So
Yes.
I'll
So,
stop.
so yeah, a bit of background. I mean, we talked about this last week that with CAR T, they they've seen effectiveness in like blood cancers and things like that. But when it comes to solid tumors, hostile environment like that, with everything that's going on, CAR T sort of falls apart. So CAR M is really like what this is what Charisma call it is the CAR macrophages. They're calling it CAR M therapy. Is this is the attempt to take it a step further to really deal with that hostile environment that CAR T therapies have fallen down with.
Yeah, and so just to further, one of the breakdowns on CAR T cells or any, for that matter, any therapeutics is the microenvironment of the tumor
Sure.
is so hostile to any therapeutics or treatments that it just, without getting into the, boy, that's a whole nother podcast to talk about how the tumor, remember, it's you, that tumor's still you, it's just gone a little haywire.
Yep.
And it's evolving and adapting to avoid your immune system. So this is a nice breakthrough. I see they had like over 24 days. They were expanding cells. These are not easy things to do. It's not like
Well,
it's a manufacturing plant where they have this big vessel and they make a pill
well,
or a
did
protein.
did you see the logistics of it? I mean, it's so similar to
Yeah.
CAR T. I mean, the in this case, blood was taken from a patient with an untreatable tumor, filtered out everything but a specific set of immune cells that were then packaged, put on a plane, and shipped, still warm, to a facility in Sunnyvale, California. We should mention that Charisma are a spin out of University of Pennsylvania.
Uh-huh.
So these cells are basically shipped across country. Then, over the next 24 days, that's where the cells are expanded, have a new kind of receptor added, and sent them back, now cryogenically frozen, on a plane to Philadelphia to be infused back into the patient. So this is certainly one of the challenges in the longer term is how to make this logistically more friendly, because there's definitely there's some barriers to get over on that
Yeah.
one.
John, figuring if you have the answer to that question, because it has kept me up at night a lot to figure out how to do some of this, because when I was really working in this space, that was one of the biggest challenges. It was like, what are we going to have some sort of cell culture suite, 50 of them across the country? That's an expensive endeavor. That finding the answer to that is like having the sports section in Las Vegas a day before the games, John. That's the lottery ticket that is. But I do think over time the cost is coming down
Sure.
somewhat. There was a company called Dendrion. They had the first approved autologous T cell therapy, and they tried to set up like 14, 15 sites, and of course they went bankrupt because of it. Before we move off of this, they referenced this graduate. I don't know who Sar Gill is, but he's the hematologist who kind of pioneered this at Penn. But Michael Glinsky, I'm pretty sure I've met that individual, so that caught me off guard. Look at that. I think I know who that is, and real excellent scientist, and he's one of the pioneers on these CAR-Ms, and they call them like Trojan horses of the tumor microenvironment, which is awesome, John. So, any last thoughts on charisma and this
No, I just
fantastic advancement? Yeah.
this part the joy of this podcast for me is learning about things I never even remotely considered, because I was always a small molecule person focused on the analysis. So I love learning about stuff like this. So
Yeah,
it's been
it's a
nice.
fascinating way you talked about, shipping them across country and so forth, but they expanded them over 24 days. I mean, our initial, the autologous T cell therapies I was working on, we did them over like 7 days, and that was an expensive endeavor. I
Sure.
can't
Yeah.
imagine 24 days. You need a clean room, you need all sorts of aseptic technique. Remember, these cells probably never really get exposed to any air, so it's all like tubing, sterility, Fantastic stuff, John, but maybe I'm boring our audience with some of that. Yeah, John, let's move on to our next topic.
So this is actually what we would call the investment section, but it's not really investments. But it's a story that emphasizes the importance of the regulation in drug development, and if things aren't quite right, the how bad the downstream effect can be. So this is basically French pharma firm found guilty over medical scandal in which up to 2,000 people died, and this was in France. It's actually Servier, who a company there, I think, are based in Paris, and they were fined 2.7 million euros after being found guilty of deception and manslaughter over a pill linked to deaths of, like, say, 2,000 people. This was a big scandal in France, because the accusation was that Servier may have cover, covered up the potentially fatal side effects of a widely prescribed drug, and its indication was actually for diabetes, but then it was found to have I think a weight loss, an appetite suppressant effect. And so I assume it was possibly prescribed off label, but like I said, there was a number of fatalities in this. And and
Yeah,
and,
John.
and it's really interesting in that the drug was never authorized in the US or UK. It was banned in Spain and Italy long before France even took any action. And so in France, about as many as 5 million people took the drug between 1976 and November 2009, when it was finally withdrawn. And it's like like I say, it's a scandal in France, and there's concerns about the lobbying powers of pharma companies. What were the regulators doing? It's a very interesting article, but it really indicates why we do what we do, why we document everything that we do, why we're regularly checked on by the FDA, etc., to make sure that what we're doing, what the data that we produce, is we have all the records to back that up, and to ensure that the drugs we help in the production of are safe. And I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating story. I'm not familiar with Server is the name of if I'm saying that right.
Servier, it's definitely Servier.
Servier.
I
Yeah,
I,
sorry. Now my English is my Bostonian kicked out there. Right,
I
Servier is not something but they sound like they're like the biggest in France, right? The
Well,
biggest pharma.
they're a reasonable size, because obviously there's Sanofi in France as well. But
Yeah,
I've actually been to Serbia. I was part of a group that went and did a bid defence at their headquarters in Paris, which was really nice because I got to spend the weekend in Paris before
yeah.
we did the bid
Oh,
defence on the Monday. Didn't get it,
oh,
but at least I got a weekend in Paris out of it.
yeah, I'll take a weekend in Paris, John. That's a good one,
Anytime.
especially this time of year. But no, there's a couple things that this is probably new to our audience. It's an amphetamine derivative that was licensed as a diabetic treatment. But then I think what happened is it had some weight loss, like you said, some appetite suppressant. So I think this dates back between 1976 and 2009. So a very this is like fen. Remember that, John? Right? I think
Mhm.
you know more about that than I do. This sounds like one of those things where it, it was a drug that started getting prescribed for diabetes. Probably didn't have a great effect on that, but doctors noticed weight loss, and then heck, I take actually I would not take anything for weight loss because I know there's these side effects. But people, I think doctors were probably giving it out. It looks like it started causing some heart and valve damage. I don't know if you had said this, they think it killed at least 500 people and maybe as high as
Yep,
2,000.
yep, yep.
And then, of course, the lawyers for um, the pharmaceuticals say, hey, they never intended it to be a weight loss. So I feel like there's something afoul in Paris on this one, John.
Yes. So yeah, but what we should do is give acknowledgement to Irene Frachon, who was actually, she raised the alarm because she noticed the link with severe pulmonary and cardiovascular damage. So again, important to have doctors keeping an eye on the
So
patient.
yeah, that's an important point. So this is like a post-monitoring surveillance thing because this is an approved drug, right? That had been
Yeah, absolutely.
obviously been
Yes, yes.
for years been, and so then somebody, we talk about stats, right? Somebody noticed a pattern in here, and
Yep.
Merciful. This is great. Yeah, that's a good point. That is a really good point, John. So I think that's going to wrap up our news,
Yep,
John. We got an exciting main topic, right?
yep. Let's go for it.
We're gonna Yeah, I mean, let's just jump right into it, right? We're going to talk about the state of the union on vaccines, current status with COVID, and comparisons of mechanisms with each accepted vaccine. So, John, where to start, right? We'll just vaccinations in the U.S. John, what we have three approved vaccines. But before we dive into those, why don't you give us some? These are some great stats that you pulled together,
Actually,
John.
although they're now a week old, so
But that's all right. I still think they're
I
worth
should have
talking
updated.
about because it really it kind of surprised me to see some of the more highly vaccinated versus lowest vaccines.
Yeah,
So why don't you?
yeah.
I don't again, John. Go ahead and
Well,
jump in, start us off, and then I'll drill down a little bit.
I mean, things are moving. Things are definitely accelerating in terms of vaccine. We thought it'd be good just to talk about state of vaccination in the US. So a week ago, the range of people fully vaccinated in terms of percentage ranged from somewhere around 10% up to about just shy of 20%. So it'll obviously be over 20% now. You know, the states that were lagging a week ago, and it will probably not have changed because I'm sure everyone's moving at a similar rate, was Georgia, Arkansas, and Texas. And then the states who seem to have got their act together are West Virginia, South Dakota, New Mexico, and Alaska. Although as a percentage, some of these you're not talking big populations, though obviously with Alaska you're talking a very widespread population. But I think West Virginia was early on cited as a good example of how the vaccine is being rolled out. I mean,
Yeah.
and to just I meant to mention this earlier in terms of New York. So, I got my first dose 3 weeks ago. At that point, it was where it had made the transition from over 65s to people under 65 with underlying medical conditions. So yes, so it was actually just announced that from April 6th it will be open to everyone 16 and older. When I went to it was Syracuse, went there 3 weeks ago. The entire hall was given over to Pfizer vaccination. Now the hall's been split in two, and there's a J&J section. So the single dose that means you don't have to go back for a visit 3 weeks later. That's been rolled out in New York too. So there's obviously New York is gaining momentum, and I'm sure other states are doing the same too. So it's really good to see that. And certainly, when I went there 3 weeks ago, I was there as a first time vaccine administry, I suppose it is. And everyone ahead of me were all first time doses. This time, I went in as a second dose. Person in front of me was second dose. So it's the momentum's picking up.
Yes. So I just being in Kansas, I feel like we're hovering in that we're somewhere in between these two states. I felt like last I heard we were like 13 or 17 or something, probably a little bit on the higher side, but we're not as high as West Virginia. And then I think New Mexico. We got to give a shout out to them.
Sure.
Dan Crone, one of our BD reps, is down in New Mexico. He's fully vaccinated and always talks about how readily available it was. They had their stuff together down there. So there's a shout out for you, Dan. The other is John. The stats on people who are actually going to get vaccinated. So I've seen some big variation here, but maybe only like 60% of the population's willing to take the vaccine. I don't know what you've heard the
I've,
latest, but
I've
I've heard it as low as 50 and as high as 60
I've
are
certainly heard,
willing
I've
to take it.
certainly heard like that seems to be that hard 30% who aren't interested. It would,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and so it's
So when
somehow
you
there
think
has to be
about
some
it,
persuasion
sorry.
there.
No, go ahead. Repeat that.
I said somehow there has to be some persuasion to those people to the benefits of them to be vaccinated and help them out on this.
Yeah, well, I mean, if 30% of the population is not going to take it, and some states are upwards of 20%, they're almost halfway vaccinated, which is great,
Sure.
right? So
Yeah.
I do think we'll consider as we're. I think a couple things are happening. I mentioned even how easy it is to get a vaccine in Kansas after I believe a couple weeks ago they made it open to the public. So someone clever invented an app on Twitter through Walgreens, and you just sit there and an appointment will come up and it'll tell you it's you know 30 miles away from your home and you can wait. And I know some people that drove 90 minutes to get a vaccine, but if you use this app, you can in 30 to 40 minutes find one within 5 to 7 miles of your house typically. And so that to me is incredibly exciting. I do think there's there's just some concern about not taking it. I for the life of me can't figure that out, but maybe I've never had an adverse effect to a vaccine. No one in my family, my direct family has. And also I don't have any underlying health conditions, so it makes it a slam dunk for me. And then before we drill in a little further, we're inevitably gonna. I think we should tackle which vaccine to take, John, and just whichever one they offer you, right? Like that's the answer.
Oh,
Just and even
absolutely.
Fauci came out
Yeah.
and said that recently, and it's just whatever vaccine, and don't I don't know, don't try to like force yourself into taking one over the other, and I don't know some of the. I just feel like there's a lot swirling around the J&J one being for because it doesn't need the um, refrigeration and cold chain of the other two, that it's to some degree for lesser people. And even our president addressed that by saying that's not the case, which was good to hear
Yeah,
him talk
I
about.
honestly, from my perspective, I think the J&J one is a game changer because it's the single dose.
Yeah,
And because that, I mean, some people
that's the traditional one. That's
yeah,
the vaccine that every CVS, every
sure, yeah.
Walgreens, yeah,
And it's, I know there's going to be some people who's like, oh, do I really have to go twice to get this done? I mean, for me to go to Syracuse, it's an hour and 40-minute drive, so because that was the way I had to do it. If I had doing that twice, yeah, it's a pain. But if you're
yeah.
doing it for the J&J and it's just one time only, that will definitely help persuade some people that, yeah, if I can get that one, that's great. So that really helps
Yeah,
a lot.
and it's actually the more traditional one. So those that are fearing the mRNA, which I hope at this point we're not, although I mean I guess it hasn't. We don't know long term, but it's been out there for quite some time. And as we've mentioned before, people have been dosed with mRNAs for decades now. So John, actually, I think it leads nicely into maybe the next highlighting, the Novavax vaccine, which is near and dear to my heart. We want to move on to that
Sure.
sort
Yeah,
of topic now.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is fluid.
Yeah, so there's some other candidates out there and other investigative vaccines. And the most notable one, it just made some news, is the Novavax. Their final results showed 96% of efficacy in the UK trial. But it did go down to about 50% in the South African variant, which we can touch on in a minute because I think there's some good and bad in there because they're one of the few vaccines that have been able to assess that right during their clinical trial. But John, this is a virus-like particle vaccine, and that's near and dear to me. That's what I studied as a PhD student, John. Right. So this is very similar to the HPV vaccine. And so this is made in a baculovirus cell line, which is an insect cell line, and this one is, this is the backbone of what's used. Although it's their spin on it, right? They have this Novavax M, and so I'm babbling because I'm excited that I know a lot about this, John. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about the actual story rather than me
I
drilling
mean,
down on
there isn't much more to the story.
nanoparticle vaccines?
Yeah, I mean, there isn't much more to the story. I mean, basically what we're seeing is it's showing efficacy against mild, moderate, and severe COVID-19, high efficacy values. It's reduced with the South Africa variant, and this is what I want to say about variants earlier on. Is like, I mean, Novavax were in a position where they actually were trialing South Africa, so they were able to test that. But I think it's good that there is a lot of awareness with the even with the authorized vaccines, they're still testing against these new variants to ensure that their vaccines are effective. So the awareness is key here. I mean, I think it's scary to hear about these variants and oh my god, what's the impact of this? But the fact is, we have the vaccines, and the vaccine manufacturers are assessing them to show how effective they are. Obviously, the one that, because we've seen like the Pfizer, Moderna, and the Novavax, the variant emerged in the UK effectively is being treated with the same efficacy as the original COVID-19. The one that does seem to be the concern is the South African one. But even if you're saying 50% efficacy for the Novavax, that was the original bar that the FDA set to say
Mm-hmm.
if the
Mm-hmm.
vaccines were 50% effective, we would authorize them. We've to some extent been spoilt by the numbers
Yeah.
of these vaccines that have come through, and we're saying,
Yeah.
oh, well, it's only 50%, but that what was the bar that was set? So
Well,
that shows how fortunate we are with these vaccines so far.
that would be a historically high flu vaccine, by the way. I think that hovers somewhere up
Sure.
between 30 and 50% too. So, but John, yeah, no,
So the take home story of this is we have another candidate coming through that is likely to be authorized in the next few months. So that will bring us up to likely 4 in this country, with others coming through.
yeah,
And so this will be an ongoing story. But yeah, if there's anything more you want to say about Novavax, go for it.
no, no, I'm good. I think we're, let's continue through our agenda here, John. I'm going to let you drive for a second. Which topic would you like to jump on
Let's
next?
how long do we really expect the vaccines to last? That was a question we were asked, and it's interesting. We were asked that question, but Pfizer have just announced, I think it was today, that their vaccine is showing strong protection after 6 months. Of course, these vaccines have only just been authorized, so this is something we're going to be generating on a ongoing basis. So we can't say it's any more than 6 months because we genuinely don't know, because it's only been available for that limited amount of time. So I mean,
How were they measuring that, John? Was that an antibody test or what were they
I,
doing?
I I don't know. I just saw it as a headline and moved
Yeah.
on. So I was busy doing other things. But I
So,
mean,
yeah, here's the challenge, right? So circulating antibodies out to 6 months, great, but that's going to eventually fall off. There might be some, but it depends on the sensitivity of the antibody test. There could be some in perpetuity, and that has to do with, I don't want to scare people with what I'm about to say, so I won't. But there is an ability to have circulating antibody because you have some B cells that are memory B cells. And really, the challenge to know long lasting immunity is an immune that's an like a cellular response that needs to be monitored, which is in turn more of a flow cytometric test or
so
some sort of
so can,
cell based test, right?
so can I ask the question? So
Sure.
how would they have done the same measure for like hepatitis vaccines and things like that? Because we've been vaccinated for hepatitis B, etc. But that window of when you need to be
It's all
revaccinated is
serological.
increasing with time.
That
So
Yeah,
I'm
that's an
sure
antibody
I'm sure it'll be a
test.
similar approach then.
Yeah, but that is because of um so the typically that's an attenuated vaccine they're using. It's been something that had, you know, decades of research behind it, but it's an initial shot and then two boosts, and then you establish memory, and then there are circulating B cells that are producing their central memory B cells that are producing antibodies against it. So it's a serological test. Now, COVID could fall into that over time, but it's going to be, probably a few more years until they have that sort of how do I say this, history, in order to
Sure.
have, like, because
Yep.
the HPV is the same way. So in the short term, remember, one, mRNAs are a little bit unique,
Hmm.
right? They're not the same as the attenuated version, so that's some of the challenge. And then the other part is we just time, right? So
Yep.
the first people vaccinated X number of months ago, and then I think that the hepatitis B doesn't evolve the way COVID does, so that's another challenge, John. So there's a couple things in there that make it a little bit more. Does that kind of answer your question a little bit in terms of the vaccines themselves, the virus itself, and then history is how I would answer that. But there is hope. If we, what I was drilling down is, if we wanted to immediately start trying to discern some of this, then it would be some massive, expensive cellular panel that you could do flow cytometrically to look for it in, maybe a subset of patients. I just don't think we're there. It's not needed, I don't think. Just because
Yeah, I'm
it'll vet
just
itself
looking
out
up
over
the
time.
the where how the see if there's any mention of how they're doing it. It's just that it's taking a while
It
to
has to
load.
be serological. When I say serological, I mean, an antibody test, John. That's probably the way they'll do it. But fascinating
Yeah,
discussion, something that,
I
antibodies
I think
typically only
we'll have to
have
come
maybe a
back to that
30-day life cycle, 30 to 45 days max. And so that maybe I will drill into it. So how a memory B cell is established, how you get central memory is you have to have a somewhere in the body there's got to be a think of it as like a repository of the antigen of interest. So that's how you have established immunity is in the instance of like the hepatitis B vaccine, somewhere in your lymph nodes, somewhere in your tissue, the antigen is still there, and that gives life to the B cell. And then over time, I think it gets incorporated. There's some unknowns in there too. Now you're getting on the
Sure.
forefront of where immunology, central immune system, breaking of tolerance, these are still some unknowns, like how does a pregnant woman have a different organism in her and doesn't and tolerates that is still not 100% understood, just like transplantation. Now, if we could figure out how to do all of these things, you're unlocking the keys to transplantation and other sorts of immunological things. So that's a little bit of a I'm digressing, but I hope I answered. It's a great question, John, and I hope I was able to shed some light on
Sure.
it. There's some I don't knows in there,
Yep.
and then I think there's just some novelty.
Well, we can certainly revisit that in the longer term. Another
Yeah.
question that we were asked is what is the decay rate of the antibodies compared to what you'd expect for other vaccines, etc. I don't know if that ties into the previous question.
I think it does, and I don't look. I haven't researched it enough to like properly answer it. But I think I shed some light on it in terms of, um, there's a typical decay rate of an antibody, and I don't think they know if it's quicker or faster relative to because what about there's so many. We're comparing it to some hallmark vaccines, but what about the flu vaccine, right? Where it's not as effective at all. So I would say that based off of the efficacy rates and 6 months, this is a highly effective vaccine, John.
Sure.
Relatively speaking, I think it's incredibly effective.
Yeah, I mean,
Which
I think I saw something in passing that, there's been the recommendation that people who are fully vaccinated, obviously still mask up to prevent transmission through. But I think there's actually the I saw something in passing to say that fully vaccinated people are not transmitting, and I don't want to say any more than that because I do need to dig into the article. Maybe that's something we touch on next time. But
it's
that's
coming, right?
the
That
argument.
information, there's probably data indicating that,
Sure.
but in another few months, that'll come to more than likely be a fact
Yeah. Sure.
that if
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
fully vaccinated and the vaccine took, you're not going to be able to propagate virus and aggression of virus to other
Yep,
individuals.
yep. But I think it is like you say, the data is starting to emerge. So this will be again an interesting thing to
Well,
touch on in the
just
longer term.
just keep masking up, right? Like
Yep,
it's I
yep.
don't I don't love wearing a mask, John, but I carry one everywhere I go, and just let's just hang on a little bit longer,
Sure.
everybody.
That's totally my approach. I am sort of yeah.
And it does seem crazy. It seems crazy to be fully vaccinated and wearing a mask. Yes, that seems a little bit, but just it's okay. Just I'm there's talks of come fall time, we might be packing our football stadiums and all this sort of stuff. But we're not going to go down that path just in terms of am I going to have to show a vaccine passport, which a lot of people that's a controversial thing. But I'm kind of I feel like I'm a free loving guy, John. I don't care. Doesn't matter to me. I don't feel like I'm losing my rights as an American to have to show that I've been vaccinated. But what do I know? So, John, let's move on to our next topic, huh?
Sure, absolutely. And it's a question of like, well, we thought it'd be good to talk about how COVID vaccines compare to approved vaccines and go in that direction.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this, right? But I think I envision a whole new realm of vaccines, John. I think these mRNAs were very good in a let's call it niche or specialized area. They were used to treat certain um, disorders. Some enzyme replacements were used. They were used in really immuno-oncology, and the unfortunate events of the pandemic have led them to become the belle of the ball, so to speak.
Yeah,
And so, as I mentioned in previous podcasts, this is a major advancement in vaccines. I do think this is going to set the bar of how we do vaccines. I can envision a world in another 10 years where your hepatitis vaccine may be somewhat of an mRNA if we
yeah,
continue to see the efficacy and we continue to see the safety of it. So those are still a little bit, I'm getting probably a little bit optimistic there. I went from John. I think you cheered me up. But that I do see the COVID vaccines becoming, and I say COVID mRNA
Yeah.
vaccines. It's an advancement, and we should embrace it.
Yeah, and I think that's very much the sorry, the sounding that you're getting from the pharma industry is that there is going to be increasing focus on this. So I agree with you that we're going to go more in this direction.
Yeah, John. What else we got here? We're winding down our topics here. I like this one. What determines frequency of administration? Um, you know, you kind of the question reads like comparison with flu vaccine. I feel like for the next several years you'll be getting an annual COVID, and I think I've talked about how they're working on a COVID flu combo. John, and I do think unless there's some predictiveness and with the amount of artificial intelligence we have and the number of people that study viruses, there may be a day where you can take a some sort of vaccine that will help. Maybe you only need it every 5 years because it's got a handle on how COVID might mutate, so that it can
Sure.
prevent it. But that's
Well,
that's
I mean,
coming next. I mean,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I think it's that. I mean, from what I read early on in this, it was like COVID doesn't mutate at the same rate as the flu virus. So, you know, will you need to be vaccinated with the same frequency as the flu virus? But that does actually go into the next topic is we have got this current and there's increase. I'm seeing a number of articles which I haven't had the time to look at, but this race between vaccination and the emergence of new variants. I mean, we're talking right now. I think there's like four or the three main variants that the CDC was talking about, but there's also another one I think maybe emerged in Arizona. But so there's the three main variants of concern is the UK one, the South African one, and then P1 from Brazil, and then there's another possible transmissible variant observed in New York City and then two in California. So there are these variants emerging. But I think that this is what the focus here is. We've talked all the way through today about you know the vaccination gearing up, states having fully vaccinated people in that 10 to 20% range, but we need that to be higher because what we want to do is have people vaccinated such that these changing if there's variants, then it doesn't impact people because they're already vaccinated against them, and
yeah.
that's the race
And,
we're up
and I
to.
guess I guess I view like a new variant. It's not necessarily a mutation. I probably misspoke there. I did
Sure.
mean
Yeah.
variants when I was talking. You're right. That's we don't know how many variants are out there yet,
No.
so it's tough to understand how we can see the future. But hey, John, that's part of why we're doing a podcast. We want to be pioneers. So, this is a fascinating topic, one that will for years to come be something that we're looking at. But we're limited by the technologies we have to. It'd be one thing if we could have some sort of scan that says, "Oh, there's X number of COVID variants out there,"
Sure.
right? That would be
Yep.
that's like the holy grail, right? So if we could somehow say, "Oh, there's 1,000 variants," then that would make the ability to make a vaccine that could cover the bulk of them a lot easier. But right now we're kind of trying to be predictive. We're trying to use, like I said, artificial intelligence, algorithms, things of that nature to sort of say, "Hey, we know these elements of it." Anyhow, John, I think there's much more to learn, obviously, and but for the short term, go get your vaccine. Like,
Yeah,
go get
so yeah,
it.
basically we come full circle, and the message at the end of this is wear your mask, take all the usual distancing precautions, and most importantly of all, get vaccinated because the more of us get vaccinated, the more we can the more we can protect each other. It decreases the chance of any variants having an impact, and it actually decreases the chance of variants even occurring, so it decreases the chance of a strain that could be more virulent than what we've seen today. So that's the important piece here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, John, always a great discussion with you, John. That was podcast number 38. We kind of got through our main agenda there. I don't know. We answered a lot of our feedback and questions, but before we move on, I don't know about you. I want to take a moment and ask you, like, are you going out to eat yet, John?
No, no, we're still at the stage where we'll do takeout, and um, we're getting closer. My daughter, she had her second vaccine dose a week ago, so she's like a week off being, fully, fully, fully vaccinated, as they say. It's 2 weeks after your second dose. She got Moderna, I got Pfizer, so we're close. My wife will get her second dose on Sunday, which is her birthday. I'm not sure if that's a
Happy birthday,
good birthday
Chunk.
present or not. But this weekend we're having our first time away from our house in over a year. The most we've done is the odd drive of an hour to something. Actually, for me, it's just been an hour to get vaccinated and back. We're actually going to meet my son and his fiance. We're renting an Airbnb between here and Boston, and so, of course, first thing I did when I'm looking at where we're staying is what are all the restaurants like? And some of them sound really good, but we're still talking. We'll just be getting takeout. There's a couple. I'm really excited. There's a couple of like this town. We're actually going to stay in Hudson, New York, but it has like a couple of French bakeries. So I think I'm going to come back with a car full of cannellis and croissants and baguettes and
Oh,
all that sort of
you're
stuff.
making me hungry. My in-laws came
Yeah,
to visit and they bought me some kolaches, which
y-
are great
yeah.
dessert. But anyhow, so in New York though, are there people you can go out to eat, but is the practice to walk in with your mask, sit down, and take your mask
I,
off?
I,
Is that
I think it is, but I don't know because I don't hang around. I
well?
sort of, I mean, the place that we have a Friday night ritual where we pretty much go to the same place. But
So
I
that's the
only ever
practice
go
here.
there. I only ever go there, pick up my takeout, and leave. So I don't know. I assume that's what happens, but I really don't hang around to find
Well,
out.
John, like the rest of like I feel like you're on the coast. I think the coasts are still in this mode, but like I know in Kansas and Missouri and I would imagine even Nebraska. I got family there. Nebraska doesn't even like 17 states no longer require a. I think it's 16 no longer require a mask. So they're like, wear a mask at your leisure. And there's states like Texas where people who are asking clients, patrons to wear masks are getting a lot of like they're getting yelled at. I don't my God given right to well just get out of my store then, right? So this is
Sure.
weird, a lot of weird stuff going on. But it's common practice, and I go out to I try to I still call it my bubble, but there's only like 3 or 4 places I will go. And you just walk in, and you put the mask on, you sit down, take the mask off.
Yeah, sure.
And then, the waitressing staff or waiting staff has masks on. Well, John, to my chagrin, one of my favorite places, they're no longer wearing a mask at all. And we walked in and sat down and then walked out because of that. Just so there was a level of just too, there's it's a we were watching some of the NCAA tournament, and there's about half the place is full. It's a big place, but when people are running around without masks on and waiting, it just had it was just a little too much for us, and we're not vaccinated yet, so we left. And I know I asked because I think I I feel like I'm probably a little bit more risky than you are, but I'm like ultra conservative relative to Kansas, John. Just so you know, like
Sure.
there's a lot of
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just such a weird dynamic to be now. I think what's sort of happening is if you're wearing a mask, people are kind of looking at you funny these days here in Kansas, which I hope doesn't become the norm.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think it's just, to me, I wear a mask. I don't view it as that much of a sacrifice, and I really want to eat out at a good restaurant and just have a really nice meal that I can't reproduce at home. But I want to do it at a time when I'm comfortable with doing it. So at least 2 weeks from now, I'll be a lot closer to that position. But to me, it's easy just not to do these things until the environment's right.
Well, I gotta tell you, I don't like wear. I mean, I was going into the office every day, so I was wearing it much more. Um, I don't love it. It fogs my glasses up, if I take my glasses off, I'm fine. I can breathe through it. And it's funny, it's been really cold here, so I think that's actually been helping to keep the mask on because
Hmm.
I'm like, why are you wearing your mask? Like, I was in the stands watching a lacrosse game for my son, and I'm like, why do you have your mask on? She's like, I'm cold. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So, because
Yeah,
there is no mandate to wear it outside, right?
sure.
I don't
Yeah.
that's there's still some lingering. Anyhow, John, that was. I just wanted to ask about that because I do get a sense that I hope that when you're fully vaccinated and even on your little trip, you venture out and get some
Oh,
good food
I'll,
for
I'll,
yourself.
I'll, and on this weekend, I will definitely be out getting stuff. Like I say, the fact that there's canellis that I can lay my hands on, that's my. I'm definitely that at least is one place I'll be going. But it's a new town. I've never been there before. I'll be wandering around just exploring, so that I'll
Yeah,
definitely do. And outdoors, I never wear a mask unless I get into a group where there's people, and then I'll put it on. But it's really when I go indoors, I'll wear it. But I think it's being logical about it.
yeah.
A strong logical streak.
I've even had one brush where someone was kind of yelling at somebody without a mask on, and I thought just if you don't want to wear your mask, just leave. Don't start yelling at people. So, John, with that, sounds like you got some good holiday plans, right? You're gonna finish up. You're gonna finish up today's podcast, and then you're heading out. Is that right?
That's exactly it. Yep, yep. A three
Right.
hour 3 hour drive, chill for a few days. We could do without the my wife having to. We have to do a 2 hour drive for her to have her second dose, but
How
we
and are you
we
going
could
for?
do it.
You going for a week or how long you going?
Just the 4 days.
Excellent.
The background to it was the plan had been, because it's my wife's birthday this weekend, that my son was going to come over here, but his fiance's just got a new job, so vacation time's precious. So we basically made the compromise of let's all meet in somewhere halfway between here and Boston. That makes it easy in terms of driving. I would just spend a few days together, and then that's it.
Yeah, that's great. It's Easter and it's a big holiday, or at least an enjoyable one. When I say big, it means I don't have to run around and get gifts, and it's one of my favorite holidays. And we missed it last. When I say missed it, meaning we had to celebrate it just as a family. So we're so psyched to have some relatives come visit. Um, really looking forward to we'll have a fun holiday meal and everything will be. I'm going to enjoy some time off. We of course have an extended weekend here. We're closed at KCAS for
Today.
today, Friday, Good Friday. But it'll be an exciting. I don't know about exciting, but it should be a good R&R for me. And got some new deck furniture, John. That's my
Nice.
big news for you. So I finally pulled the trigger. I mean, I don't know about you, but buying deck furniture is not an easy task, and we settled on some. Uh, what we love it. It's about a 7-piece set, and it doesn't have any you know um, pads to it, so it's all built into the furniture, so you don't have to take the pads
Sure.
in when it rains.
Yep. Yep.
And so
Nice.
that was kind of the selling point to us, and we're pretty excited. So I believe we're supposed to, baseball kicked off. The Royals won yesterday. The weather's getting a little warmer. We're supposed to be in the 60s and 70s, so I think I might try my Uni pizza grill this
Oh,
weekend,
go
John.
for
So
it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm super excited. These are, ham, pizza. I mean, can't get any better than that.
Exactly. So actually, growing up in the UK, Easter Sunday we always got big chocolate eggs, which are like usually filled with other, so Cadbury's and Mars. The eggs are probably like 6 inches tall, and they'd have
Yeah,
further sweets inside them. So we've maintained that tradition. So we're taking a bunch of those Easter eggs over to Hudson with us, so for
that's great.
the kids who are no longer kids. But yeah, so it'll be also be good to get away, because it means I'm not focused on the garden, because the deer have basically devastated my tulips.
Oh,
So I'm like, I'm in mourning for my tulips. I don't, however many hundred I planted, all got basically eaten
oh.
down to the bulb. So yes, yes.
It was just a snack then. You put 100 grapes out there for the
Yeah,
deer.
yeah. So I have some plans to counter it, but yes, that was
Hot
a
pepper
major
works
blow.
well. Be nice to the deer.
Oh,
Don't put it.
oh no,
Yeah,
no, I wouldn't do anything anti the
yeah.
deer.
No, I know. I
It's
know.
basically, I think this is a plan for next year. I found these like chicken wire
Gotcha.
cloche that next year I'll cover
Sure.
them so they can't even access
That'll
them.
keep them out. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
No,
it's
I'll
all
do a
it's
lot of
all
gardening.
it's all learn and plan for the future. That's the way
Yeah.
I function.
It's just good exercise, John. That's how I look at it. I have likewise got some garden. I don't know if gardening is just general spring cleanup of the yard, which I started a little bit this week, but that'll be exciting and should be some fun. I got some helpers. I call my in-laws their helpers. They love to help. I actually might even move some rock. I might do something real adventurous and reconfigure some rocks in my yard, which makes me think about moving rocks, which is never fun. But yeah, should be an exciting weekend. Just to, like I said, do a couple new things. Got a Christmas gift I can try and some new deck furniture and nothing too elaborate, but really looking forward to some good time with the family.
It's
John,
nice to come out of hibernation. That's effectively what it feels like, isn't it?
yeah,
The weather's
yeah,
starting to improve, although I've snow on the ground right now. But it's like at least you feel it's spring and things are happening. And yeah, I'm in an optimistic mood
you,
at the
you
moment
still
too.
have snow on the ground, man.
We had snow yesterday, yeah. Yeah, it's like it was
Jeez.
overnight and it all cleared up and then it snowed again in the evening. It's like what are you doing?
Well, it was below 50 watching outside and below 50 weather at 8 o'clock at night is brutal. Um, and we dropped into actually, I don't have anything planted yet, but we dropped into under 30s. We were into
Yeah.
the 20s, I think. But we're supposed to head into the high 60s today. You can just feel it. Over the next 3 to 4 days, we'll be in the 60s.
Yeah,
So it should be.
so in terms of planting, and we will wrap up soon. In terms of planting, the company that helped dig out our backyard, did a lot of changes there. We were talking to them about plants, and we have like a list of trees and shrubs that we want to get in, but we're not really going to be planting those until well into April, just because you don't know when you're going to get another frost here. It's
Yeah.
the joy of living in upstate New York,
Yeah. No, and I planted like 8 rose bushes last Mother's Day, and they're doing well right now.
Good.
Everything's blooming out here. It's exciting. I'm even maybe I'd even go for a nice bike ride or two this weekend. Haven't done one of those in a while. It's been a long winter, John. So I don't know if our producers want to add anything. They've been sitting by very quietly. I don't know if they want to chime in, or otherwise we can wrap up, John.
I think yep. It seems like they're quiet. So okay.
Okay.
So well, thanks very much. It was good to get together again, and I suppose we could mention that next time we're likely to have a guest. We actually
Yeah.
we have a
Yeah, let's do it, John.
we have a topic for podcast 39. Introduction to bioanalysis. It'll be questions from a beginner, and we will be inviting a guest who's very excited about appearing
Yeah.
on the podcast.
We'll leave a teaser. We're not going to
Yeah.
tell you who it is.
No,
But
exactly.
yeah,
We'll
John,
leave it at that.
been a great podcast number 38. Really looking forward to 39. Imagine that, John. We're creeping up to 40.
And there could be some major happenings come 40, but we won't say any more than that right now.
Well, I mean, I know 50 we're going to have to do something big, but and I've got some thoughts on that. But no, John, I'm really looking forward to next podcast, and that'll be 39. And always good to have, I say questions from a beginner, but that individual, I think will stump us, John, with some of our questions.
I agree. Yep.
Anyhow, enjoy your trip, John, and have a great holiday. And to our audience, likewise, have a great holiday.
Yeah, have a great weekend. Talk to you later.